From the fact that they're still inferior to gas-powered cars, to how the increased competition might just kill the entire industry, here's why electric vehicles are in trouble. If you're thinking about swapping your gas guzzler for an electric vehicle, you might want to reconsider, because they're not the silver bullet that everyone's making them out to be. Your average gas car can hit the highway and keep going for hours, but an EV, not so much. We call it range anxiety for a reason. No one wants to be stuck in the middle of nowhere, hunting for an elusive charging point. It's just not practical, right? And speaking of charging points, where are they? They're not on every corner like gas stations. If you're living downtown in a major city, sure, you might spot one or two, but venture out into the countryside and it's a whole different story. And even if you do find one, how long are you gonna sit there? Charging an EV isn't like popping in for a quick gas top-up. It can take hours. Who's got time for that? And when it comes to money, one of the main reasons why people switch to EVs, yeah, you might save a few bucks on gas over the years, but the upfront cost? It's steep. Higher than a similar gas car that's just as capable. Not everyone's got that kind of cash lying around. And there's also a whole bunch of other issues like battery life. They don't last forever. Sooner or later, you're gonna have to shell out for a new one. And trust me, that's not cheap. Choice is another one. Fancy a sporty coupe or a hefty SUV? With gas cars, the world's your oyster. EV, the options are getting better, but they're still not quite there. Cold weather is another headache. EVs don't like the cold, batteries don't perform well, and the range drops even further. Not great news if you're living somewhere with harsh winters. Hauling stuff around, towing a trailer? Good luck on doing that in your EV without killing your range. So yeah, EVs have got their perks, but don't let the hype fool you. They've got plenty of issues to iron out before they're ready to take over the world. There's no rush to ditch a reliable gas car just yet. And we've all heard about EVs being great for the environment, right? No tailpipe emissions, cleaner air, all that jazz. But when you look at the bigger picture, it's not all that it's hyped up to be. For starters, making these cars isn't a walk in the park. Mining, getting down and dirty to extract lithium for the batteries, it's not exactly a green process. In fact, it can be downright nasty, causing soil erosion, water contamination, and habitat destruction. Kind of puts a damper on the whole clean energy vibe, doesn't it? And speaking of lithium, there's not an infinite supply. It's a limited resource. We've got to ask ourselves, what happens when we start running low? Plus, it's not just about digging it up. It's about processing it too. And that uses a ton of water. Not cool in areas where water is already scarce. And the energy that's literally needed to charge these EVs? Well, it's gotta come from somewhere, right? And if your country's still reliant on coal or natural gas to generate electricity, well, you're just moving the pollution from the tailpipe to the power plant. Just because you can't see the problem doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And what about when the batteries in these EVs give up the ghost? They can't just be tossed in the trash. They have heavy metals and toxic chemicals. You can't just bury that stuff. It's gotta be recycled. But no one has figured out how to do that properly. Right now, it's expensive and not all that efficient. So the question is, are EVs really the green machines that they're made out to be? Maybe not as much as we'd like to think. Sure, no emissions sounds great, but you gotta look at the whole journey. From mining the materials, to plugging them into the grid, to understand the real impact. I'm not saying EVs are the bad guys. They've got potential, no doubt. But right now, they've got a few skeletons in the closet. If you're thinking about going electric for the sake of Mother Nature, maybe take a step back and check out the whole picture. It's not as clean-cut as it seems. And one of the reasons why people still have hopes for the EV industry is, well, it's gonna get cheaper to make them, right? As with any new technology, the price of products gets cheaper as time passes. But this might not be the case with EVs for a lot of different reasons. We've already touched on the whole lithium situation. This stuff isn't as common as dirt. We can't just dig up more wherever we fancy. It's limited. And with the demand for EVs skyrocketing, guess what happens to the price? Yep, it shoots up. I'm not just talking about a few extra bucks here. The price of lithium has doubled, even tripled in places. And that's going to hit the EV market right where it hurts. But it's not just lithium. EV batteries also need cobalt, nickel, and other minerals. The same story applies. Demand goes up, supply struggles to keep up, prices soar. It's a domino effect. And the last piece to fall? The price tag on that shiny new EV. And then there's logistical problems. Moving all these materials around the world, it's a complicated dance, and it only takes one misstep to throw the whole thing off balance. Look at what happened with the global pandemic. It tossed supply chains into a blender. We saw delays, bottlenecks, you name it. Now imagine a similar disruption, but in the EV supply chain. It could send prices through the roof. Labor costs are also bound to increase at some point. These minerals aren't going to mind themselves. It's hard work, and often it's done in less than stellar conditions. As pressure grows for fair labor practices, costs could rise even more. So what does all this mean for the average Joe looking to snag an EV? Well, it's not great news. Prices could climb, making these cars an even bigger investment. The EV industry isn't a bubble. It's part of a bigger global system. And when that system faces challenges, it's gonna ripple right through the car lot. The bottom line? If you're hoping that EVs will become a bargain anytime soon, you might want to think again. As it stands, the road ahead could get a whole lot bumpier and way more expensive. But if you've been taking a look at EV prices for a while now, you'll know that they haven't really gotten more expensive, for you and I at least. In fact, they're getting considerably cheaper every year. So what gives? Well, it's safe to say that the EV market might just be at the peak of its popularity right now. They've figured out most of the logistics for the current market, and consumers are the ones benefiting from it the most. But at the same time, the market is getting crowded. Like, really crowded. Everyone wants a piece of the EV pie. New models are popping up left, right, and center. Every regular car maker you can think of, Toyota, Volkswagen, Honda, Ford, they've all dug deep into this industry for now. You'd think more competition would be good, right? Not always, because here's the thing. With so many options, car makers are scrambling to stand out, and often they're doing it by slashing prices. They're cutting into their own profits, all in the name of staying competitive. On the surface, it looks like a win for us buyers. Lower prices? Yes, please. But here's where it might not be so good for the industry. These low prices might not stick around. If it's costing more to make the cars, and companies are earning less on each sale, that's a recipe for trouble. The big players might weather the storm. They've got other cars to fall back on after all. But the smaller companies, the ones betting it all on EVs, they could be in hot water. And what happens if companies start going under? We could end up with a market that's all over the place. One minute, there's a bunch of cheap EVs on offer. The next, there's only a few players left, with prices back up again. See, the thing is, a healthy market needs balance. Cutthroat competition can push innovation, sure, but it can also lead to a kind of chaos that's not sustainable. If making EVs isn't profitable, who's gonna stick around to make them? And if the market goes haywire, that whole affordable EV dream could go up in smoke. Prices might shoot up, and your dream ride might suddenly be out of reach. And if a company you bought an EV from goes under, you're stuck with a car that no one can service. No spare parts, no software updates. You'd be left holding a fancy hunk of metal. Oh, and remember the great range of EVs we have now? That could shrink fast. Less competition often means less choice. And that's no fun for anyone. So, from how the increased competition might just kill the entire industry, to how they're still inferior to gas-powered cars, that was why electric vehicles are in trouble.